Hello and welcome to another Knives Sports Adventures video. Today we're doing another knife review. This is a Ruike 108 P108 SB. Ruike is spelled R-U-I-K-E. Horrible branding, but actually a really good knife. So occasionally I come across a budget knife. I've done reviews like this a couple times that really punches well above its weight in terms of what it's capable of and how good of a knife it is. This is definitely the case of this knife. So let's talk about it and what makes it such a unusual knife. So it's a steel frame lock. Handles are made out of steel. Frame lock, you'll see there's no over travel stop on the frame because it's all steel. So the over travel stop comes in the form of this little lock addition up here, which is a lock safety. So once that's on there, I can't unlock the blade this way. I've never actually used that. I kind of like the idea that they did something a little different though. It's functional. Is it necessary? Not really, but it's cool and it works. And if you needed this to absolutely stay open, it would function that way. It's a ball bearing flipper, which is pretty special given how inexpensive this knife was. Flipper action is really good. The flipper is a bit smooth. There's no jimping on the flipper. So you do kind of notice that that's a little slippery and you can accidentally take your finger off that if you're not too careful. But it works really well. I haven't really wanted another secondary way to open the knife or anything. The blade on this is very thin. I'll put the specs downstairs, but you can see it's flexible enough that it's, I can bend it a little bit with my fingers since I'm being careful here. So a bit of a concern there. This is not really a hard use knife, but it is a really good everyday carry knife. Has a lanyard hole, a little bit of something unusual there. Again, some unusual styling on the pocket clip, but it works really well. That button that sticks down is smooth, so it doesn't catch on anything. Not quite a deep carry clip, but functions really well. So let's get into details here. This is 14C 28N steel. I had never heard of that steel before. It's a relatively inexpensive steel, but this knife has an absolutely phenomenal heat treat on it. I was carrying this for a couple months off and on, using it frequently, and I knew that it was going to have really good edge retention in my test based on how it carried and the fact that it resisted corrosion so well. I did not expect this to be the best edge retaining knife that I have ever tested. The only knife that I've ever tested that was in this range was the Benchmade Shootout, which I did a review on a little while ago. This knife did 325 cuts through my bamboo dowel, and it was still slicing paper. Just the smallest little bit of edge deflection, but still functionally sharp even after all that. So absolutely amazing edge retention on this knife. And that is one of the unpopular opinions I have about knives, is that the heat treat on your steel may matter more than what type of steel it is, expensive or not, depending on the usage of the knife and the corrosion resistance that you need and stuff like that. But this knife has absolutely unbelievable edge retention, again, especially since it's so cheap. My only real ergonomic problem with this knife is the sides are far too slippery. This is, I always have to think about it. I notice myself paying more attention to holding on to this knife every time I pull it out of my pocket than I would with one of my other knives. I don't really like that, but overall, it's not crazy given the cheapness of this knife that it would have that one little, I'm willing to forgive it because of the price. I will probably at some point, when I go to the Smoky Mountain Knife Works or wherever, have this engraved with some type of pattern just to give me a little more grip, because I think that would fix the problem. But it is a little bit slippery, ergonomic wise. Otherwise, ergonomics are really good. Again, the flipper's a little slippery, but it's shaped well enough that that's not a huge problem. So let's get into the disassembly and we'll talk about how it's put together. I believe both of these are T8s. Let's see here what we got here. This is a T10. Yep, T10 is too big. There's my T8. Yeah, so there's a T8. T8 on the pivot there. Comes out very easily. There's a little bit of a, looks like a Teflon washer on the pivot bolt there to give it some extra tightness. And it looks like, yes, the bolt on the bottom here is also a T8. And man, that is tight in there. Okay, so it's coming loose, but it was very tight. Some Loctite on there that you can see. Let's see where we are with the disassembly here. Okay, so it's only the 2 bolts for the disassembly. There is the slide mechanism, and it looks like I've got something going on in there. Ah, okay, that's the actual slide is on that little bar. Slides forward, slides back. This is a spring tension bar. That silver piece is a spring tension bar that's putting tension that direction onto the bolt that goes through the bar there. And puts tension on the slide lock there. Again, there's the frame lock. No over travel stop there because it's just all steel. This is just a pin here in the back that holds the back spacer on, so that's pretty cool. This side looks like it goes into the pocket clip bolt there. So if you want to take this off, you got to take the pocket clip bolt off. That is keyed. Okay, this pin is keyed, but I'm not sure why, because the back spacer just spins around it, so I don't really know why that's been keyed, but it is. Frame lock there, you can see it's, you know, it's steel, so there's not as much there to it as it would be on a titanium knife or something like that. Let's take a look at the bearings. Here's the bearings. Smaller bearings, right? So it's not like the big bearings like you would see on a 0 tolerance. So those probably will wear out quicker, but it's, you know, it's a cost-saving measure. This is around a $50 knife, so you're not going to get the big expensive KVT bearings that you would see on some of the other knives. This pivot, so the back side, it felt like it was keyed. It didn't open on me. But it doesn't seem like it's keyed to anything. The pivot here, pivot pin is keyed on the opposite side of the knife, so that when you're unscrewing the pivot bolt, the pivot won't spin, but now when you've got the knife disassembled, it actually does spin. That's kind of nice. It makes it a bit easier to disassemble. Again, bearings that go, smaller bearings that go in there. They've left some material around the bearings there to give you a little bit more thickness in the handle, as opposed to the channel where they've hollowed out the stop pin for the stop pin to go back and forth. Inside of the knife is skeletonized to save some weight, which is a good thing because this knife is a bit on the heavy side for something its size. Let's put all the parts on here just so you can get the weight on this knife. So if we put all the parts on here, all the little pins and stuff I've got in the magnetic bin, looking at 4.2 ounces. So that's reasonable for something that has a relatively thin blade and a steel handle. You could make this lighter if you did a G10 handle or something like that, but not out of the ballpark there with the pieces on this knife. So I want to talk a little bit about the stop pin and how they've done this, because it's not my favorite arrangement for a stop pin. What they've done is put the stop pin inside the blade, so that as the knife opens and closes, the stop pin travels with the blade. They can do that, and they can press fit the stop pin in the blade so it's very tight, which is nice because it makes it, you know, not prone to play. It's sturdy because you have a full kind of 180-degree wrap around the pin there at the back and the front, so there's not a lot of room that it can wiggle and stuff like that. I don't like them doing it fully enclosed like this. And the reason that I don't like that is because on this very knife, at one point I had this and it got a little tiny piece of what I think was cardboard in this channel. And as I opened the knife, the stop pin pushed the cardboard back like this, and it stopped against the back stop here on the cardboard when the knife was open. So the knife flipped open. It felt like it was doing what it was supposed to do, but it didn't open quite fully all the way. There was still a fraction of a millimeter there, and the frame lock couldn't engage. So the knife felt normal, but it wasn't actually locked. So I prefer other arrangements other than the fully hooded stop pin, because that can happen, and when it did happen, there was no way to get that out without disassembling the knife, because there's not enough space really to get in there and clean it out. So that's a small quibble. You know, it hasn't happened again, so I don't think it's a huge problem, but it was kind of annoying when it happened. Really the only thing I don't like about this knife is just the slipperiness of the handle. Other than that, it's been an exceptional little knife for the low amount of money that I had to spend on it. So definitely a case of a inexpensive knife that performs a lot better than it should for its price. Definitely would recommend one. Enjoy your knives and keep adventuring.